Now, I still practice at the range, because at the FBI, I need to practice my precision. And I bring this up only because the first story coming at you is very personal to me. Now, the other two stories involve precision and timing, which is something that every dentist needs. Otherwise, things can go very wrong. And we've all had a toothache, and we've all found ourselves lying or sitting in a dentist chair. And think about the power that we give them. We're laying there, essentially helpless, while they're behind their masks, with sharp tools in their hands, poking and probing around our mouth and head and face. Now, thankfully, most dentists are good people. But these next few stories you're about to hear are not the case. Before I begin this next case, I don't want you to think that everyone out there is evil. They're not. It's just that working for the FBI and the department I'm in, I get to see and face off against those you never want to meet in an alleyway. And I get to see the bad side of people every single day. One of the reasons I have this channel is so that you can hear these stories and be vigilant and keep an eye out so nothing like this ever happens to you. I was on a call in Austin, Texas 4 years ago. I arrived at Mercy Hospital at around midnight and met Dr. Lawrence Bernard. He explained to me that he had a patient who had been mugged, and that the patient had lost several teeth in the attack, which had been kept by the hospital. Now, these teeth usually would have been thrown away, except an intern caught something attached to one of them. So with the patient's permission, the intern had it dissected, and in the tooth they found a small microchip implanted within it. The patient's name was Amanda Rayleigh, and she was well known to the Austin Police Department as she often complained about an alleged stalker. However, police could never substantiate her claims. Now, I was there because we had found a similar chip on a Jane Doe 2 years prior in Colorado. Our Jane Doe had been strangled, and her fingers and toes had been chopped off. While her teeth were intact, they were implants, so we could never really trace her identity. I asked Amanda how she got the chip in her mouth, and she was genuinely perplexed, saying she had some teeth issues a few years back and had her wisdom teeth taken out, but that was the only time possible that it could have happened. Now, I rushed the chip through forensics, and they all came back saying it was a GPS tracker, giving someone the ability to track a location. Now, Amanda's dentist was a Dr. Amit Granger, who coincidentally moved his practice from Denver to Austin a year and a half ago. I got a warrant within 10 minutes and had a team outside of his office and home. All, however, lay dark, so I had everyone wait. As I walked down the hospital hallway to grab some coffee, I noticed this man standing by the vending machine. Now, I had seen Amit's photo from a driver's license, and I instantly knew it was him. I could see his right hand was holding something in his jacket. Now, I couldn't tell if it was a gun, a phone, or what it was, but his eyes were locked on Amanda's room, and his gaze was that of an obsessive stare. His forehead was sweaty, and he just looked manic. Now, while it was midnight at the hospital, it was busy. As I slowly approached, he moved towards Amanda's room, and I pulled my piece and I identified myself as FBI, freeze! Now, I probably scared him, and he made a sudden hip motion turn towards me. I shot him in the neck. He fell back up against the wall, and it instantly ran through my mind that I might have made him jump. I might have made him make that sudden movement at me. And I might have shot an unarmed man dead in cold blood. His body crashed to the ground and blood sprayed across the floor. His eyes lay open, unblinking. He wasn't ever going to stand again. I hurried over, hoping to find a weapon in his hand, but there was only a phone. Now, this wasn't the first time I've killed someone, nor was it the last. But I was put on desk duty while there was an investigation. It turns out Dr. Death was responsible for 2 other deaths, and several other women were walking around with chips in their mouths without realizing it. I definitely think of him whenever I go to the dentist. But rest assured, you'll never be his patient. Last year, I went to the dentist to get my upper left wisdom tooth removed. I thought they'd offer me general anesthesia, where I'd go to sleep and wake up and it would be done. But instead, I was told that I would have to have the twilight option, which is where you get the needle in the arm. You're a bit groggy, but unaware of your surroundings and not fully asleep. Now, I'm not totally sure why I had to have this option, but it was something to do with how complicated the surgery was. I figured as long as I didn't feel any pain, it wouldn't matter. I wasn't nervous at all, as I didn't really read up on what was involved. But my friend Damon gave me a ride, and then he was going to swing by and pick me up after. They injected me, and I felt a little dizzy. They applied some gel to my mouth and lowered me into the chair. It was a strange sensation. I couldn't feel my hands or my feet, but I had an incredible itch on my nose. God, I wanted to say something, but realized then I couldn't say anything. It was absolute torture, real quick. The dental assistant pressed down hard on my tongue. The pressure really hurt. Then I felt a sharp stabbing pain into my gums. It was excruciating. She turned to the dentist and assured him that I wasn't feeling anything. But I was. I tried to speak. I tried to tell her that I was feeling every single time she stuck her instrument into my mouth. But I couldn't. I heard the sound of a drill and then a saw, and then another needle, and I felt a jab into the interior of my cheeks as the dentist poked around. It was the worst pain I'd ever felt. And then there was this crunching sound. It was so loud, and the scraping as he literally ripped out my tooth. Now my nerves were so shot at this point, but as each time he touched a tooth, a sharp pain would strike through my brain. And as he retracted his scalpel and the instrument that carried the tooth, it somehow slipped, and he dropped it. Now I felt it wedge in my throat. He didn't realize it at first. He was talking about his future vacation or something. My tooth was in my throat, and I could feel myself choking on it. And yet there was nothing I could do. I tried blinking rapidly, but never saw a blink happen once. It was like my brain knew something that was happening, but my body and my brain were just disconnected. When the dental assistant asked for the tooth, the dentist joked that he might have dropped it. And she looked around outside of my mouth, not even thinking that it was inside. I could feel my windpipe closing and fluid building up. I felt like I was drowning. I was begging for help, begging for her to save me. She stuck a suction pipe into my throat and it cleared some of the clot. But I guess I somehow swallowed it. And I pushed my tooth further into my throat, jamming it in there. Now I was telling myself, breathe through your nose, breathe through your nose. But I just felt it getting hotter and hotter. It was like I was in an oven. And then she panicked. I heard them say that I was choking, at which point I could no longer breathe. I vaguely remember falling out of the chair and hitting the floor, and then being spun over and then just blacking out. When I came to, I learned the assistant had performed a tracheotomy on me. She had cut a hole in my throat so I'd have an airway to breathe. Now, have you ever seen one of those commercials where people have smoked for too long and they have a hole in their neck? That's me now. The next time I have a toothache, I'm going to take a hammer and smash it out. It'll be less painful. I can often tell if someone's lying just by looking into their eyes. I talk to them and get them to talk back. This helps me determine if they're telling me the truth. Now, I'm not a detective like you. I'm a poker player. And while I've made a lot of money in Vegas and in all the legit casinos around, I've made most of my money in underground games, where the action is so weak, I can go in and win so big. It's literally like taking candy from blind babies. Of course, they are dangerous and things can get scary. I wouldn't be writing this story if I hadn't experienced something creepy. I was in Mexico City last year. I'd been bouncing around from one place to another, mainly playing with ex-US Pats, when someone told me about these Mexicans who were gambling away so much money, like in the tens of thousands every night, with no poker ability whatsoever. So I stupidly got into the game and found myself there with 3 of them. It was creepy right away, as 2 of them never spoke. The main guy who ran the game was tall. He said he was a dentist. He assured me that he wasn't cartel or anything like that, and the game was legit. After a few hours, I went up about $50,000. It's a huge win for me. And then I got into a massive hand. I looked down, and I had 4 of a kind. 4 tens. Now this is a nearly unbeatable hand. On the board, there was only one hand that could beat it. A royal flush. Which would be near impossible for this guy to have. Now this particular game was no limit, but the house rules kept on changing, so it was a little sketchy in that regard. But I went with it. Mr. Dentist looks at me, and then looked at the board, and then looked at his hand. It was my turn to act. I felt he had a strong hand and would call me if I went all in, so I did. I pushed my entire stack into the middle. All in, I said, which was about $55,000. He looked to the other 2 players, and then back down to his cards. And then he whispered,
"I'd like to bet $1 million.
$1 million? I was thinking in my head, yeah, I'd love to bet $1 million too. Except I couldn't cover you, and all that I could bet is $55,000. He continued his whisper.
If you allow me to bet $1 million, I'll allow you to cover me. House rules.
I was a little confused. You want to bet $1 million? I asked. He nodded his head. I don't have $1 million to cover you.
How about if you lose, I take all of your teeth?
He whispered back. Now at first, I thought he was joking, but he was very deadpan. I paused for a moment, waiting to see if he'd break a smile, but he didn't.
You need to decide, and you need to decide now. Will you allow me to bet $1 million?
He pulled out a suitcase and flipped it open. Inside was, yep, $100 bills.
I'll give you 10 seconds to decide. Otherwise, I'll just fold,
is what he said. Wait, what? He was willing to fold his hand or bet $1 million? I was completely confused. He motioned his hand as if to throw it away.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, I said. You can bet it. He smiled and said,
I bet $1 million. What are you going to do?
I was about to yell out call when I stopped. Something just made me stop. Now, I don't know what it was. I think it was the look in one of the other people's eyes. It was the look of fear. Now, they hadn't said anything all night. Do you guys think I should call? I joked. Sorry, I know you guys can't answer that as we're in the middle of a hand. I wasn't expecting them to answer. I mean, they hadn't said anything all night anyway, but I was trying to get a read off their body language, Something was up, and I couldn't pinpoint what it was. So I glanced back to the dentist, and he smiled at me. He was enjoying this way too much. Now, my cards were so strong, he would have to have the near impossible to beat me. But something in the back of my mind was telling me I was in trouble. I looked at one of my opponents. I never did get your name. Hector, he replied. And as he opened his mouth for the first time, I saw he was missing most of his teeth. Now my eyes moved to the other guy, who opened his mouth as if to warn me. There wasn't a tooth to be seen. Now the dentist laughed and placed pliers on the table.
Just because they made the wrong decision doesn't mean you will. But if you do, they will hold you down and you will feel some pain.
It was at that moment I was thinking about calling his bed, because he was applying and upping a lot of pressure on me, which is really what you do when you don't want someone to make the call. I was conflicted. I'd asked him if he'd show me his cards if I folded, and he shook his head, said no, he wouldn't. I asked what my mouth would look like, and all he replied was,
bad, real bad. You won't be kissing many girls, senor.
Again, he was doing this to best persuade me not to call. This made me even more want to call his hand, to find out what he had, and to win that $1 million.
We can't stay here all night. What's your decision, my friend? Call or fold?
I had to go with my gut and my teeth. I folded. I threw my cards down, and I stood up, shook his hand, and walked out the door and never looked back once. I didn't even go back to my hotel. I went straight to the airport and flew so quickly out of Mexico, you wouldn't believe it. I'm back in Vegas now, and at one of the casinos. Sure, I wondered what he had. But you know what? I have my smile.
Which one was the scariest? And just remember, don't turn